Miller, and welcome to the I Love CVille Show. Thank you kindly for joining us. An absolute pleasure to connect with you guys through the I Love CVille Network. This show originates in downtown Charlottesville, Virginia, in our building, the Macklin Building, but our audience is Commonwealth-wide, countrywide, and worldwide on the I Love CVille Network. It is long-form content that cannot be taken out of context, and it's an opportunity for you, the viewer and listener, to get informed, entertained, enlightened, and educated. We try to do it every single day, Monday through Friday, 12:30 to 1:30. Today's guest is a name, a brand that you guys know. He's running for Congress in the 5th District. His competition, Bob Good, the incumbent. A lot to cover today on the I Love CVille Show with Josh Throneburg. Judah Wickhauer is our director. We would be remiss not to highlight his efforts. If we could go to the studio camera and then a two-shot, and let's welcome the candidate to the show. Josh, good afternoon. Thank you kindly for joining us.
Thanks, Jerry. We're excited to be here.
It's our pleasure. Thank you for carving out some time for our viewers and listeners on a busy fourth quarter for you. The show is yours, sir. If you can introduce yourself to everybody that's watching the program.
Yeah. Well, my name's Josh Throneburg, and I live here in Charlottesville, so quick commute for me to get over to the studio today, 8 minutes in total. I'm married. We'll celebrate 20 years in December. I've got 2 young daughters who, one is 7, the other's turning 13 this coming week. And we've owned a small business here in Charlottesville, but really what I've done most of my adult life vocationally is pastor. I'm an ordained minister. I've pastored in local church for 15 years. Absolutely love that, and that's kind of who I am now. My very short background is I grew up on a farm in Illinois, raised in that rural, red, white, conservative world where it's just cornfield after cornfield with little tiny towns, spotted, and that's where I grew up. Loved it, but Charlottesville's home.
We have comments already coming in positively for you. Juan Sarmiento is watching the program. He lives in Louisa County. He's the head fleet technician for Charlottesville City Transportation. And he says, Bob, not so good, is not qualified to debate such a great candidate like Throneburg. You, the viewer and listener, can offer perspective live on air. Questions are coming in fast and furious. I will get to a few myself before we get to questions from the viewing and listening public. Why run for Congress? This is someone, and yours truly, I'd like to get civically engaged at a more local level with the Board of Supervisors. I've realized that, half the folks may like you, half may be indifferent. I mean, this is a challenging endeavor here, and you're doing it at a much more macro scale here. Why make the push for Congress?
So it's pretty simple. I've got young daughters. They are walking into a world that is deeply uncertain, and I think as a dad, the thing you want to do is create a world where your kids can thrive and they're going to be safe and happy and healthy. And right now, that's not the trajectory for so many things. Whether we're talking about planet, whether we're talking about democracy, whether we're talking about racism or sex, there are just a lot of things in our country that are a real threat to their future. And if you've ever seen a picture of my family, what you know is white guy with a Korean-American wife, black daughter, biracial daughter. And so, as a father of women and women of color, I feel compelled to try and create a better future. There are a million ways that you can do that, but sitting in rooms where we make the laws and policies that provide the framework for our country is one of them. And I've always had a heart of service, and so I'm in the game.
Neil Williamson, thank you for sharing the show, guys. Throw this to you. The 5th District is vast. I mean, I said this to start the program. There are literally states in our country that are smaller than the district that you're running within.
Yep.
How do you identify and how do you, listen to learn with folks across such a vast district?
Yeah, it is a big district. I've put about 40,000 miles on the car this past year because I'm across it all the time. And it's not only bigger than some states, it's bigger than some substantive states. It is a big space. I love it. I have grown up in a rural, red, agricultural, conservative world. That's the family I grew up in, the town I grew up in. And so a lot of this district is red, rural, conservative, agricultural. And so that feels like home to me. That's the environment of my youth. But I've also as an adult, I became a Democrat, and I embraced a lot of those ideals. And so you come to places like Charlottesville where there are a lot of Democrats, and this feels like home to me too. And so I think one of the things about me just as a person is I've spent about half my life on the farm and half my life in town, and that allows me to speak both languages fluently. It allows me to connect with a lot of different people from a lot of different backgrounds. And I think really importantly, one of my critiques of my own party is sometimes we are condescending and dismissive, but I'm not that way. Like, these are people that I love. I love my family. I love my friends. I love my hometown. And so it's not that I look at that world and think of it as an enemy or something to be dismissed. It's just a world that sometimes we disagree with, but I still want to love those people. And so I love being all over the district. It's exciting for me.
Harry Hancock giving you some props right now. Nancy Kofer has shared the show. Austin Corbett, welcome to the broadcast. Give it a like and a share anywhere you are watching, just like Bobby Lewis Galo has done. And Nancy, thank you for sharing. You got a lot of people watching the program. I see 4 different media outlets on our IP heat map, literally as we speak here. You mentioned the Democratic Party. Bob Good, obviously a Republican. It seems to me that party loyalty and ideology is in a lot of ways dividing the country.
Yeah.
And you have the skill set of galvanizing people. Explain, 2-part question, how you've seen party loyalty create division and lack of better phrase, beef.
Yeah.
And how you plan, if elected, to galvanize and bring folks together.
Yeah. Great question, and a really important one, I think, right now. How have I seen that party loyalty? I mean, honestly, my opponent is the definition of it, right? He goes to events full of rooms of Republicans and then uses language like, Democrats are evil. Democrats are the party of death. I'm not going to Washington to work with Democrats. I'm going there to defeat Democrats. And so his entire shtick is to divide, right? Is to push one side on one and make the other side the other, the enemy, the opposition. And I think that is destroying our democracy. I think what we need are leaders. The art of government is compromise. To be able to come into a room, work really hard. I think something, you think something, and I'm going to try to convince you all day long that I'm right. And in the end, we're going to see what voters say, and then we're going to pass a law, and we're going to move forward. When we come into rooms and we just throw stones at each other and talk about how the other is evil, we're destroying the fabric of our democracy. And so, for me personally, I am someone who is going to work to represent every single person in this district, whether or not they're a part of my party, whether or not they voted for me. And I'm just going to do that by going out, as you said, listening to people. I was at the Louisa County Fair on Saturday, and a woman came up to the booth, and she's like, I'm a Republican, I'll never vote for you. And I said, that's all right, let's have a conversation. We chatted for 5 minutes. It went great. And by the end, she's like, if you win, I have one request. I was like, what's that? Unite us. We are so divided. We need someone to unite us. And I think even amongst a lot of Republicans out there, there is a hunger for our country to work better together, and I think that's a pretty high goal for me.
Gwendolyn Gale Cassidy, we'll get to your comment. She's a voter in your district. She's literally watching in Italy right now. So good evening to Gwendolyn Cassidy. We'll get to that comment. Why will Bob Good not debate you?
Well, we do have a forum that is set up for October the 26th. He, put it at a location that I think he feels is comfortable for him, and he put it as late as he possibly could on the campaign schedule so that if it doesn't go well for him, there's not much time to capitalize on it, because I think he probably isn't real well suited for this environment. But we do have a candidate forum on the schedule. I think in the end, he just believes that actually putting his ideas and his record out in front of people isn't actually going to help him win this campaign. I think that's a sad state when you think your ideas and your record are unhelpful to win. But I think that's the position he's in. He feels like his best strategy is just ignore Josh as much as I possibly can and hope that other people ignore him with me. And so I think that's his strategy. Obviously he's welcome to employ that strategy. I think democracy would function a lot better if we just brought the ideas of both candidates before the people, but that doesn't seem to be his motivation right now.
We chatted with David Toscano on the program last Wednesday, and retired delegate David Toscano, a political veteran.
Yeah.
We discussed the 5th district for about, 10 minutes on the show, and I asked him his thoughts on the 5th, and he had positive things to say about you. He also highlighted that it was a right-leaning district historically, and it would be challenging to take a district that is historically very red. How does your campaign overcome those challenges?
So I think there are a few things to just note, just some numbers, right? We lost this district by 5.5 points back in 2020. What we have seen in the special congressional elections that have happened in the last 2 or 3 months post the overturning of Roe is that the Democratic candidates in those campaigns have outperformed Joe Biden's performance in 2020 by 5 points, 7 points, sometimes double-digit points. So if even just that happens here in our district, it just becomes a neck-and-neck campaign, regardless of anything else that's happening. More importantly, we do not have a president who's on the ballot this year. We don't have a senator who's on the ballot this year. That hasn't happened in Virginia since 2010. So if you're going to come out and vote across this district, you're going to come out and vote because either you want to vote for Bob Good or you want to vote for Josh Throneburg. And that gives us huge opportunity. Again, Bob Good has brought no money back to the district, no projects back to the district. He's passed no legislation during his time in Congress. He was ranked 431st out of 435 in his willingness to work with others to get things done. And so he has a very poor record, and that doesn't inspire a ton of people to come out and say, yeah, I'd love for you to do this job again. And so when it's just him versus I on the ballot in a year like this, there's huge opportunity. And so from our campaign perspective, we are all over the place all the time doing everything that we can because this is it's a hard district, just like you said, challenging place to win, but doesn't mean it's not winnable, and we're giving it every effort.
What are the issues? And Marjorie, we'll get to your comments. You have many questions and comments coming in. Viewers and listeners, put your comments and your questions in the feed, and we will relay them live on air as long as they follow a golden rule approach to questioning. What are some of the top issues? Maybe issues isn't the right word. What are some of the top concerns you've seen on the campaign trail in the 5th District?
Yeah. So, one of the things we hear the most, I'll give you the two that we hear the most. We hear a ton about inflation and rising prices. It's very real. We have a very rural district. You got folks who drive big trucks over large spans of land to get to the grocery store, to get to their employment. And so, high gas prices are particularly hard on rural communities because of that. We have high grocery prices, we have food deserts, so it's hard to get to the food in the first place, and then when you get there, it's pricey. And so there's a lot of, just concern out there amongst folks about those prices. So that's a big one, and one that we talk about. The other one is we do hear just from both sides all over the place, our government isn't working, the division is killing us, somebody please help. We hear a ton of that. And again, I think my opponent has been a definition of that divisiveness, and so I think that makes people in our district in particular really, really frustrated and wanting something different. So those are the things that I hear from others. They're not always the things that maybe I would have thought of first, but it's as I'm listening, that's what I'm hearing on the trail.
Megan Dufresne watching in Cumberland, Virginia. Welcome, Cumberland, to the broadcast. I see a ton of Southwestern Virginia. I see your family watching. Do I say it Kewanee? Is that how I say it? Kewanee, Illinois?
Kewanee, okay. Illinois. Yeah, I do have some family in Kewanee,
Illinois. On
absolutely.
The broadcast.
That's the hog capital of the world right there, Jerry. So if you ever want to go do the annual hog jog, go to Kewanee, Illinois in September.
This is the first time in about 8 years of I Love CVille show history I've highlighted Kewanee, Illinois on the broadcast, so a testament to the candidate here. Inflation is, the saying, it's almost a cliche, is folks vote with their pocketbooks and their wallet.
Yeah.
OPEC is reducing oil production by 2 million barrels a day.
Yep.
When that news broke last week, I live in eastern Albemarle County. I saw the gas price jump up a quarter overnight.
Yep.
The expectation is maybe by Thanksgiving, $5 plus a gallon in gasoline. From our standpoint, there's no more regressive tax, air quotes if you call it, than gas and rising gasoline prices. So let's talk about dollars and cents here. I guess brass tacks, if you may. If inflation is worsening and the KPIs are getting more difficult to swallow, the key performance indicators, how does this influence the voter come election day?
So I think there are a couple ways to view that. Number one, we blame presidents for everything, right? That's just the way that it works. Even if gas prices are rising across the planet, we still will say it's Joe Biden's fault that gas prices are rising, and that's how it is. We just go with that. So in some ways, rising gas prices will make it harder for Democrats to win. There's just no doubt about that. I think the other side of that is, for people who are paying a lot of attention and really watching, I think they'll notice that, but Democrats are actually working hard to not make that the case, right? We were the ones who pushed the gas price gouging bill through, trying to make sure that folks weren't taking advantage of the opportunity and really gouging people at the pump, whereas lots of Republicans opposed that. And so I think there's an effort there. One of the things I talk about a ton out on the trail is, you know what? Yeah, these prices suck. Like, they are so high, and this is so hard on people. Part of the solution is, how do we, in the short term, bring those gas prices down? But part of the solution is, how do we, in the long term, remove our addiction to fossil fuels so that we don't have only one option when it comes to fueling our vehicles? Because that's part of our problem. Everybody has, or not everybody, most people have a gas-powered vehicle. So when gas prices go up, they have no other option. And that addiction to fossil fuels means that we are going to have to pay whatever is asked of us. And so the more that we can begin to broaden our source of energy, the more options we have, so that we are not so reliant on those fossil fuels. And again, I feel like Democrats are the ones who are trying to solve those problems. So I think if you're paying attention, you know that Democrats are very much aware of those rising prices and trying to fix them. I think Republicans will just yell over, not all Republicans, but a lot of them will just yell over and over again about, oh, look what Joe Biden did to gas prices. And that's a good strategy politically. It's not, doesn't fix the problem.
This question's coming from Italy. A voter in your district who is in Italy. Her name is Gwendolyn Gale Cassidy. She says, today is World Homeless Day. If you were elected, please provide a step-by-step plan of exactly what you will do to help eliminate the plight of our current homeless population in our community. How will you get 500 plus currently homeless members of our community into housing? Also, 40% of the American population is one paycheck away from homelessness. What concrete plan, if you're elected into office, will help solve this problem? Good question.
Yeah, great question, and a big answer that I'll try to be pretty concise with. So we know that having people who are homeless then going into some kind of housing, in particular housing that becomes transitional or permanent housing for them, is a huge part of solving homelessness. And so that would be a real priority for me as a representative, is making sure that we're investing the resources in allowing that. We also know that sometimes that's hard to do, because people who are homeless have chosen to be on the streets because sometimes there are requirements around drugs or things that they refuse to follow. And so there are so many things we need to do about having resources for people who have addiction issues, making sure they have mental health resources available. So there are a lot of parts to solving it, but certainly housing is a key component of it. One of the stories that made me most angry on the campaign trail was, and I won't name the city or the leader, but I was meeting with a county administrator, and that county administrator had reached out to the Good Camp because they're having more and more homelessness in their county. And so he reached out saying, would we be able to get any federal funds to be able to build at least a small shelter that we could begin to provide some of these resources? And he was summarizing the response, but he said the response was, homeless people need to get jobs. And he was just so angry and so frustrated. That's not a solution to the issue. And so it's a big problem. It's a rising problem, especially with more and more addiction across our district. That's why we're seeing even some of these rural towns having a larger homelessness issue. And so part of it is dealing with addiction, part of it's mental health, part of it's getting them into housing that can be transitional or permanent, because we know that has been a proven solution.
Here's a question from a Republican, someone who's active military. This is a good question. Josh, I'm a Republican voter who loves Republicans. Mike Pearl is asking this question. I'm a Republican voter, he says, who loves Republicans like Youngkin, but does not like Republicans like Trump and Bob Good.
Yeah.
He says, however, I am really concerned about Democratic policy proposals like abolishing the Electoral College, increasing the Supreme Court, and codifying abortion up until the moment of birth. Please tell me your positions on one or all of these things, and he's willing to listen to learn.
Well, let me speak at least to the Supreme Court very quickly. I'm not in favor of increasing the number of Supreme Court justices. There is a bill that has never been brought before Congress to be voted on that does bring term limits in. It's an 18-year, a one-time 18-year term. I think it's a very interesting concept for us as a country to consider. It puts one justice being rotated out every 2 years. It doesn't then matter whether 3 justices leave during a 4-year presidency and then 1 leaves during an 8-year. It just makes it even across the board, and then depending on which presidents we're electing, you'll see the Supreme Court reflect that. So I'm not in favor of more justices. I would be interested in further exploring the 18-year one-term limit for them. Can you repeat Roe? So I'll try to be concise here as well. I am not for just allowing abortions all the way up and all the way through, right? And Roe didn't do that either, right? Roe actually, basically, once you got to viability, that didn't work anymore. I think there are some things that are really important for voters to recognize. One of them is 97% of all abortions happen in the first 15 weeks of a pregnancy. So that 3% that happens after is almost exclusively because some medical condition has come forward. The pregnancy is non-viable. It's dangerous to the mother, right? The number of abortions that happen after 15 weeks is very, very small and almost exclusively medical in nature. And so that concern that I think people have sometimes that Democrats are going to be out there just letting doctors go in and destroy viable baby, it just isn't a real thing. And so I would absolutely want to protect viability. I think that's really important. But again, I want to make sure people recognize that after 15 weeks, we are talking about a very small number of abortions.
You have so many comments coming in here. Viewers and listeners, we're going to get to as many of these as possible. Our heat map of IP addresses is literally showing hot on the map across your entire district here. One of the comments that is coming in our comment aggregator on our software is schools.
Yeah.
I'm seeing, because I can search by keyword, I'm seeing schools and education everywhere. Albemarle County, I'll offer some perspective here, then pass it to the candidate. I have my wife is watching, we're in your district, we have a rising kindergartner. And then we have a second son on the way, due Thanksgiving. My wife is an absolute rock star right now. Josh, we're scared, man. It takes 3.1 miles. The school from our house would take our son 57 minutes on a school bus. Our kid is, 4.5, not even close to 5. When he starts kindergarten, he would be 5 years old.
Yeah.
2 hours each day on a bus.
Yep.
We have kids and we have parents that are watching in Greenwood and Afton in Albemarle County. And their kids are spending 2 hours one way on a bus and then 2 hours back, 4 hours round trip. They're missing the first 2 classes of school.
Yeah.
The first 2 periods. And being straightforward and straight shooters, we both are. Often the kids that are riding the bus are children that are on the financial margin.
Yep.
Because both parents are having to work.
Yep.
Let's start open-ended with schools first, and then we'll get into the nitty-gritty here. Please offer some perspective on your stance and your foundation on public schools here in the 5th District.
Yeah, thank you. I want to start, I'm going to talk about it kind of at the really big level first. And just for context, I went to public school. My mother was a public school teacher for 3 decades. My daughter is in public school 7th grade. My other is in 1st grade. So I'm a product and champion for public schools, I hope. If you hear me on the campaign trail, and some people have already probably heard me say this, we need to make just an absolutely generational investment in public schools. We have the greatest military on the face of this planet. We respect our military, we honor the service and the sacrifice that we make, and we fund them better than anyone else on the earth. I think that we need to take the priority that we have placed on national defense And we need to apply that to our public school program. We need to just send in extraordinary amounts of resources so that we can hire more teachers and pay them better wages, so that we can hire more staff and we can pay them better wages, so that we can build better schools that give facilities for every student in our country access to the kind of facility that actually promotes learning and growth. We have schools in our district where roofs are falling in. We have schools where there are not nearly enough teachers, where they're putting kids in hallways. We have a school in our district where they don't have any, they've run out of room, so now they're using the cafeteria for classrooms, and all the students have to just eat at their desk, right? Like, there is just an absolute, we just need so much more investment in our schools. So much of what we have seen over the last year or two is just this huge exodus of teachers. And so we can't hire enough, we don't pay enough that people want to come in and do the very hard work that it is. So just my perspective is, if you think about the way that we have built the best military on the planet, we need to invest in our schools. The vision that we should have at a federal level is, how do we have the best public schools on the face of planet Earth, where our kids go in, they are safe, they are healthy, and they are being instructed and built up to be the best generation that we have ever produced as a country. So that's kind of my big picture with education. And I will just say, again, my opponent is trying to abolish the entire Department of Education. I think what his hope is to privatize education entirely. And the Department of Education, you're talking about people on the margins. The Department of Education is really who gives the funds for particularly kids with disabilities. So you take away that department, those parents that are concerned, parents who are concerned about a kid who has disabilities, who don't know what they're going to do, they're so grateful that right now they can take their child into the public schools to receive an education so they can go off and go to work or go to school. And all of a sudden my opponent wants to take that away. It is awful.
You have Kaz Massey, Megan Dufresne, and Jason Howard. You have Kelsey, you have Stacy and Stephanie, all with questions for schools, all with different zip codes in the 5th. Specifics on schools, if we could. The school voucher program is becoming a hot topic.
Yeah.
You talked about the privatization of education. We saw this in Arizona. The governor is pushing this, Youngkin.
Yep.
And to give a Cliff Notes version for the viewers and listeners, the concept would be putting a value, a dollar value on a public school education, then offering the parents that dollar value in the form of a check where they can utilize that for their son or daughter from a school standpoint, private school, homeschooling, charter schools, whatever it may be. That's the Cliff Notes.
Yep.
I'm going to pass it to the candidate here. Jason Howard has this specific question. School choice and midterms. How big of a topic is this on the campaign trail?
So, we hear it on the campaign trail some. It's not the thing we hear the most. I think in reality, the economy is such a big deal, and so folks have their attention right there. But we do hear it plenty. Going back to your comment about people who are on the margins, right? That's one of the primary reasons that I believe so strongly in local public schools. Because if you write a check for the value of your kid's education, right, well, then there might be a school that's 20 miles away that a parent says, oh, I'm going to use it to take it to that public school over there. But that only works for the parent who has the margins in their life to do a 45-minute commute every morning and every evening. But if you are a low-income parent who just needs to get your kids into a school so you can get to the first of the 2 jobs that you do, you don't have time to do that 45 commute at the beginning and the end of the day. And so that price that you are getting, that value that you're getting in that check, is still going to be used on this local public school, and you're not going to be able to, and that school is going to be losing its resources, because people are going off to the other schools, and that's just going to further degrade the opportunity for low-income people. So I reject it. I think we need incredible local public schools with great investment that really builds those schools up. I think that's the direction that we do, that is both good for our kids and it's the most equitable across our society.
We both read the Crozet Gazette article from Friday.
Yeah.
I shared it across the I Love CVille Network over the weekend. I encourage all viewers and listeners of this program to go to the Crozet Gazette website, where the author, Kim Martin, writes a compelling report, a balanced report of what it was like for teachers and students and parents in the time directly after the pandemic, when kids returned to school following stay-at-home mandates. It was I mean, I almost characterized it as like Michelle Pfeiffer in Dangerous Minds here.
Yeah.
Where students were afraid to go to the bathroom. There was descriptions in this Crozet Gazette story of students legitimately having sex in the bathroom, using drugs and fighting, and students literally getting in their cars, driving home to use the bathroom for fear of going into the restroom at the public school. And this is in Albemarle County, Virginia, where we have one of the highest per pupil spending amounts in the Commonwealth of Virginia. So this is not, this is in a well-funded district. Mm-hmm. We'll put it like that. First, open-ended, then I'll get to specifics. What'd you make of the Crozet Gazette article and story?
Yeah, I mean, you described it right. There was another teacher who had 14 stitches in a hand because he was trying to break up a fight and got injured. There was another teacher who was knocked unconscious because she was trying to break up a fight. So if those descriptions are accurate, and one of those was from the teacher who had the 14 stitches, so I trust it is. Yeah, it was a wrenching article to read. My tagline is compassion and common sense. I have deep compassion on teachers, administrators, schools. COVID was an unprecedented event, and I know that there were schools that were trying to figure out what are the policies that make sense. How do we be compassionate to our kids as they come back to school? How do we change our expectations, revise our policies so that we are really trying to be compassionate to the trauma that they have been to? Clearly that did not work in Albemarle County. Hindsight is 2020, but if you can look back at how that was handled, I'm certain they would have changed some things. I was grateful that at least at the end of the article, it seemed, even from some folks who had contributed to the article, that this year things seem to be off to a better start. And so hopefully they have learned from that experience and clearly from some of the failures. But I was blown away by what I read. And as you rightly said, as a parent, you start thinking, oh my gosh, right? Like, what is my kid walking into? And so it's scary.
We live in a neighborhood of roughly 860 homes in eastern Albemarle County, a neighborhood that is extremely active from a voting standpoint, very engaged. My wife and her friends walk the neighborhood or on a group chat together, and the conversation is often, we're going to vote on schools.
Yeah.
And my wife, and I get a little emotional here. I love her dearly, and Josh, the love that she has for our son and our son that is in her stomach is, undescribable. And I find it invigorating and motivating, and I find it oftentimes like, man, I want that connection with our sons as well, and I'm slowly building it. As you know, the mom has a connection that often cannot be duplicated. She says, I'm going to vote when it comes to this election and local elections tied to schools and our son. And I think a lot of voters are going to vote that way. I'm going to vote that way. School buses, we don't have enough drivers, as you know.
Yep.
Charlottesville City is given a 12% raise to city bus drivers with the hope of attracting more. The reality is that takes them to $21 an hour, and that's a very difficult wage to live on in a community where the cost of living is so high.
Yeah.
How do we solve this predicament of school bus drivers, which seems on like the surface so basic? It's like we have to get the kids to school on time and safely, and home on time and safely. How do we solve this?
I mean, what we need, because in general we have the buses, but we don't always have the drivers, right? That has been the kind of bottleneck in our system. And so the only way for us to solve the problem is get more drivers. And the only way to do that is to increase wages, make it a more, attractive job opportunity so that those people will come in. I think there's a little bit that can be done in communicating out to the community. Here are options, right? Because I have talked to multiple retirees who have come out of retirement to drive buses for the sake of their school district. That has been particularly true in some of the rural districts. I've talked to multiple older men and women who are probably in their early 70s. They were just happy at home, and then when COVID hit and all of a sudden there was this great shortage afterwards, they came out. So there is the opportunity to, put that need out there, communicate it well so that folks who are able, but really what we need is better wages, and that means we have, greater investment, which goes back to what I said earlier. Unless we have the investment that is there, the financial investment to really build up an incredible school system, all the way from bus routes into the classroom and into the administrations, we're going to continue to have problems.
I've caught in some heat for this. I've caught in a lot of praise for this. I've highlighted how so many school systems, certainly in the 5th District, but I'm more focused on Charlottesville and Central Virginia, my home.
Yeah.
How so many of the school systems have pushed this, let's rebrand the schools, rename the schools. And I've said so many times on this talk show, it's watched and listened to by a lot of people, that I am all for renaming the schools. Okay? I do not stand for some of this nastiness and divisiveness from the past.
Yeah.
But my focus has been on the immediate priority and the immediate problems.
Yeah.
And the immediate problems is teachers are so severely underpaid.
Yep.
Bus drivers are so severely underpaid. And because of this undercompensation, the teachers are quitting at an aggressive clip, and we can't hire enough drivers. So my push is, why don't we get the renaming and the rebranding to happen, just not happen right now, so we can reprioritize getting bus drivers and getting teachers in the classroom so kids get there on time and kids can learn from a fully staffed school.
Yeah.
A lot of the community has been, Jerry, let's go, that's the right push. Some in the community have said, hey, how can you say that? And have hurled nastiness to me. And we both know, being in the public eye, that having thick skin it's a necessity.
Sure.
We're going to have the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yep.
And I'm sure you felt it as well.
Yeah.
Talk to us on where you stand with this, because I think this is a topic, certainly in Albemarle County and Charlottesville City, that's going to resonate with voters.
Yeah. Well, so I think that really comes down to the capacity of these school districts and kind of where they're at, right? I've been asked a lot of times, what are your thoughts on monuments that are, and what that looks like? Because we have people across this district who have very differing views on monuments. And what I say over and over again is, if we want to put monuments in historical places, right, or in historical settings, because we want to tell the context and the history of this country, fantastic, we should do that. But I do not think that we should put monuments up in the center of a square celebrating the person who stands on top of it, as you have, black men and women driving around and seeing that person celebrate it. That is a daily reminder for that person that this country still does not understand my plight. They still don't get it. And so I absolutely understand the value in making the changes to really make this as a welcoming and inclusive and just open and loving community as possible. And if school districts are able to do that while getting the school bus drivers, getting the teachers, getting the administrators, getting the kids, great. But yes, we have to, in an emergency, you prioritize what is kind of at the top. And I would say yes, if we don't have the resources, the time, the energy to do all of those things well, then great, we can name things a little bit later. I still think that's an important value for us, but we do need our kids to be in school. And just one other, riffing a little bit off of what you said, one of the things that came out of that Albemarle article that I thought was really insightful was a lot of the perhaps acting out of some of these students was because so many of their teachers were unknown to them, right? A lot of teachers had left, so now it's new teachers. They don't have the same relationship. Without that relationship, they act out, because we know that kids really thrive off of those relationships with teachers and adults in the school setting. And so the more we see this wild kind of transition of teachers running all over, the harder and harder it is going to be for our kids to have a great school day and to learn a lot. And so really getting those teachers in the classroom, staying in the classroom, well compensated, well prepared, taken care of, I think that is priority one for us as a district. And so that's definitely what has to happen first.
We'll talk schools, guys, all week long. On Wednesday's program, we'll have Dr. Meg Bryce on the show. She's going to be our guest at 12:30. Thursday show, Kelly Jackson's our guest. She has a daughter in private school and one in public school. And on Friday's show, we're very excited to welcome Bill Munkasi to the show. And Bill, I'm sorry if I'm messing up your last name. He was an Albemarle County teacher who was quoted in that Crozet Gazette story. He's now in the private sector as a software developer. So Bill's going to join us on the show on Friday. Still, I'm looking at the thread, and the moms, the moms are going to be the key to winning this election here, as I'm sure you know here. The moms are peppering me with questions on schools here. talk to us about this. One of the concerns I have, if the public schools don't solve this short-staffed predicament quickly, that I'm very, very concerned that the public schools are going to become educational epicenters of students from families that don't have a lot of money. Mm-hmm. We're seeing even lower middle class heading to private school. And we are now, with our son, who's a rising kindergartner, doing the circuit. What are we going to do with our son?
Yeah.
So we're touring them.
Yep.
And the private schools have said to us, you have until November, January to make a decision.
Yeah.
For the following September.
Yeah, sure.
Because that's where the waiting list is going.
Yep.
So these enrollments at these private schools are like increasing big time. Your thoughts, it's an open-ended question on if this isn't fixed quickly, that the public schools become these educational epicenters of families that don't have a lot of money.
Yeah, I'm really hopeful that's not what happens. You know, my oldest daughter, who's now in 7th grade here in Buford in town, she was homeschooled for 2 years during the pandemic for a variety of reasons. So this is actually her first year back in public school, and it has been incredible. She loves it. She's cheerleading. She's made tons of friends. They go grab a bubble tea after school together. It has been an incredible experience, and she has loved every minute of it. The teachers are working really hard. The administration has worked hard. We absolutely have to get these groups resourced. There's just no doubt about it. We need parents to pitch in where they can. I know parents are tired, but teachers are so tired too. And so it is a community response that is necessary to kind of bring us out of the, you know, and it should be important. It should be noted, right? Medical folks are leaving in dramatic numbers. This is not, education isn't the only system that is in chaos, right? We're seeing that in a number of others. COVID has just rocked so many of the foundational pieces, the fabric of our society, and I'm absolutely hopeful that we can rebuild those things. So I'm not interested in turning away from the public schools yet. I think we should be radically investing in them, doing everything in our power to build them up. And my own experience has been a good one so far. We were nervous, to be honest, and we weren't sure how it was going to go, but they have worked so hard, and I hope that we can just see more and more. The Albemarle story is, it's better this year than it was last year. And so if we can see that kind of trajectory and momentum, great. Let's build on it and really make something that's great for the future of our kids.
We'll do one or two more guys on schools, and then we have to talk climate emergency, improving the healthcare access and affordability. We have to talk protecting rural communities, working toward, racial equity and ensuring quality education and a veteran's right to choose. A lot of the issues that are on your website, we're going to highlight all these. I'm going with what the viewing public is asking, and it's the school. This is from a mom of two. Thank you for this conversation, gentlemen. Cara, thank you for watching and asking this question. Cara says, can you comment on the changes in public schools from a grading and lower standard standpoint for late and missed assignments?
Yeah.
And a segue from that one from another mom is the report that we did on I Love CVille on SOL scores for third graders.
Yep.
In particular, third graders that are, Hispanic or African American, from a performance standpoint, it's not a pretty sight there.
Yeah. Yep. We have some of those score issues across the district, and we've talked with folks. So these are real things. These are not things that are specific only to our community here in Charlottesville and Albemarle. Those are some real things that are across the district. I think one of the takeaways from the Albemarle article that they clearly was that the relaxation of some of those policies around grades and missed work and late absences or later arrivals in class, that it wasn't working. They have stiffened those up, as they came out of last year, and that seems to be a part of the solution. So I think our kids need that structure. I remember one day I knew a woman. She was in early education. She walked into my house. And when you walked into we were in a condo at the time. We walked into my house. There was a wall on one side, and there was a couch on the other side. And so it was just clear. There's only one way to walk in my house. And she walked in, opened the door. She's like, "Oh, this is perfect for kids." I was like, "What are you talking about?" She's like, "Kids, if they walk into a room that is open, it is no good for them because it doesn't tell them where to go. But when they walk into a room where the obvious pathway is to go this way, it's just better for their psyche and and I was like, that's right, I get it, right? That's what our kids need. They need structure, not oppressive structure, but they absolutely need direction. Here's what you're achieving. Here's what you're shooting for. And when you're struggling, we're going to help you to catch up. But I think that relaxation is probably going away, and we're bringing back some of the rigors of education, which should be there. And so I think that really is important, and I think more schools will go that direction.
One of the issues on your website is improving healthcare access and affordability. And good night. As someone who's self-employed, my family and I essentially have catastrophic coverage. We're self-employed. We don't have the benefits of economies of scale and negotiating with healthcare providers with hundreds of employees.
Yeah.
I mean, we're a small team.
Yep.
My wife is one of the team members.
Yep.
And those rates eat up a good chunk of our take-home.
Yep.
Healthcare access and affordability, improving this for the 5th District. Explain that to us.
So, as some of your viewers will no doubt know if they followed the campaign at all, this has been a very personal experience for me on the campaign. We launched in July of last year. We had a fantastic first quarter, raised a lot of money, had good momentum, and in October we found a mass on my wife's neck. We are also self-employed small business owners, and so we didn't have insurance at all at the time. We found this mass on her neck. We were going in for biopsies, and all of a sudden it was getting more and more concerning. And we got to December 1st. We didn't have insurance. Medical bills were mounting up, and now we had an appointment in early January that we knew was going to be very expensive. And I said, we got to do something. And so we went on to the Affordable Care Act website. We punched in our information. I was terrified the whole time because I thought there's going to be some question that says, do you have some kind of condition that would disqualify you? But it never did. We just went through the process. At the end, it said, you're approved. Starting January 1st, you have health care coverage. And just the weight, fell off of our shoulders. We went in, my wife got diagnosed with cancer. She received incredible care from UVA's health center, their cancer center. She's doing great. And we could not be more grateful that healthcare was both affordable and accessible to us in that moment. That should be the way it is for every American. What you see on my website is I want universal healthcare. I want every person in this country to have access to affordable healthcare, that they can feel the confidence that when they get sick, they can receive the treatment that they need to address that illness or sickness. And so it's not only a high priority for me as a person who just looks out with compassion and common sense and wants to figure out how we provide that. It has been a personal story for our family, and that only increases its sense of priority for me.
What are the opponents to that? Like, what is the? I mean, it seems like this is very straightforward here. What is the resistance to that position that you hear or is passed along to you?
I mean, we're talking about a more social healthcare program, right? And anytime you use that word with Republicans, they're trying to make us a socialist country, and then the scare tactics come out. There's kind of a psyche within Republican culture, which is you get your own, right? I get a job, and that job provides me with insurance, and therefore I have it. I don't rely on the government to do that for me. And so I think there are some just parts of the system that make them a little bit oppositional to the idea of some kind of universal coverage. I just think it's the right future for us as a country where every person has access to it. And as you know, right, as a small business owner, if I knew that all my employees just had access to health insurance and I as the employer wasn't the one that necessarily had to worry about that, that's an extraordinary opportunity for me to pay them more money, hire on more staff, grow the business bigger. So there's opportunity that comes with it as well.
Josh is resonating with voters and viewers and listeners. Kaz says it's so nice to hear detailed responses to a wide-ranging list of questions. And I want to highlight this with the candidate here. We did not come in with a script or a plan. He is literally adapting to the viewers and listeners and the potential voters on the fly as the questions are coming in. How about this one on universal health care? Do you think private health care should be banned?
I'm not going to go that far yet. And I think there are probably smarter people than me in this world who could address that. What we have seen is that sometimes when you have access to a good, solid healthcare plan, but then some people want to supplement that with a private option, that has been good for them. And I don't want to restrict that necessarily. I want to make sure that at a base level, every single person in this country has access to good, quality, affordable, and within reach, right? One of the problems we have in this rural district is something that's close enough to actually access. I want to make sure that's where we stand. I'm not out right now to ban some kind of privatized supplement or something like that.
I'm seeing the Bob Good Camp on the show here and watching through their social channels. Folks in Bob's camp, I am happy to, first off, we host both sides of it, okay? We have the candidate, Josh Throneburg, on the show here. We're happy to host you as well. We do this thing evenly. I'm also happy to host a debate in any capacity here on the program, content that would be long form, that would live on the internet for all voters and listeners and watchers to potentially access. I want to put that out there. I got other comments coming in on healthcare and affordability here. This is from a mom who's watching in southwestern Virginia. Our story is similar to Josh's, except it was my husband who had cancer. We were between jobs and we didn't have healthcare coverage, and we were panicking.
Yep.
And put it mildly, stress was something we welcomed. It shows what level of stress we were feeling or experiencing at the time. What is the likelihood of having healthcare affordability for all if you are elected right out of the gate?
Right out of the gate, maybe not high in terms of right away. My goal, if I'm elected, is to, when I get to Congress, go find the folks who are already working on really helpful things and help them get it done. Not show up there, with my lasso and come on, everybody, join me. But to go find the folks who are already doing great work hard for them, build some trust amongst my colleagues, so that when I get to a point where I want to push something, I have some friends that will partner with me. So, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to show up day one and just start working really hard for some of the great things that are out there, and healthcare is among them. I don't know the end of her story, and I just want to obviously communicate that I hope it's okay. But as she was talking about the stress, Thanksgiving dinner last year was like, I remember we sat down at our friend's home and there was this incredible meal, and we ate a corner of the plate because my wife and I were just terrified in the moment. And I can only imagine what she and her husband have been going through, and I just want to make sure, I hope that has a happy ending somehow.
Stephen Coppinger's watching in Northern Virginia, and he has a good question. He said, has Josh learned anything from Tom Perriello's campaign, Denver Riggleman's campaign, or even what Bob Good did the first time around that he could apply to his campaign today? That's a good question.
Yeah, great question. We certainly paid a lot of attention to Tom Perriello's campaign, given that he was the last Democrat to win this district. One of the things that has been very true of Tom Perriello, and I'll add on, very true of Abigail Spanberger, who won a similarly hard district in what was the previous 7th, they showed up all the time, everywhere. They were just always there. Tom Perriello, the story is him walking around in like the town of Appomattox, where he had an office in a place that didn't have a high population, but he was out there even when he probably should have been, dialing for dollars and raising money. But he was on the street chatting with people and just, having conversations. Those are epic stories, and it was part of why he succeeded. Abigail Spanberger, I think, maybe even to a higher extent, there's stories of her, showing up to baptisms at churches and birthday parties, just constantly on the ground, totally present. This is a rural district. Relationships matter. A lot of folks in this district have relationships that go back generation. And what they want you to do is show up, build that relationship, and be present. I will echo your invitation to the Good Camp. We got a couple empty chairs sitting right here. You can slide into one of them real easy for a conversation. I think it does matter that candidates show up. To that end, maybe I haven't learned a ton from the Bob Good Camp, but I certainly have from Abigail Spanberger and Tom Perriello.
So I'll highlight that. Folks, if you want to interact with Josh's campaign page is best. The campaign page, facebook.com/Josh for Virginia. There's a lot of comments coming in, and if you want to interact with them, do it through the campaign page. William Clark is watching the program. He says, hello, Josh, from Nottoway County, the Nottoway County Democratic Committee. Thank you for your visit to Nottoway to make our Meet Josh Gala. Please mention our voter registration on Saturday, October 15th, 2022 in Blackstone, Virginia at the Scott Funeral Home parking lot from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. I think I may have just done that for you there. Cheryl Griffin has given you some props and has said the ballot is in the mail as we speak. So I think you're earning some votes on today's talk show. Why should folks vote for you?
You know, it's one of the very humbling parts of this process. You meet someone. It happened to me last night. I show up at an event, and this person has been out knocking doors for months on my behalf, and I've never met them. People just, I don't know, they give a lot, even if they don't know you personally. They believe in democracy. They believe in the opportunity, and they want to see a better future for them and their family and their kids. I think the thing that I can say is I'm an honest person. I'm not doing this. My wife loves me. I'm a person of faith. I believe that my Lord loves me. I got a lot of friends. I got a good family. I don't need this to feel good about myself. I don't need this to feel important in life. I have a lot of folks who care about me. I just really, really, really want to make people's lives better and to build this country into the vision of what I think it can be. And when I look at the things that are happening right now, it's terrifying to me as a dad. Schools are one thing, but our environment is another. There's just so much that I can just promise that I will work really, really hard every single day on behalf of every single person in this district to try to provide a better life for them and their families. And I think if we have more folks in DC who use the prism of compassion and common sense to make our laws and to set our policies, I think our country will be on a better track, and so I hope they'll vote for me.
Jonathan Smith watching, listen to this comment. Jerry, we're watching in the Elks Lounge right now with your show streamed to our television. I agree with previous commenters that if we could have both men in the room addressing questions that they know in advance, it would help all of us understand the candidates even more. I second the previous commenters' take on a debate on this platform we will all watch at our Elks Lounge. We'll close with this, and for those that want to get more information on Josh, the website is joshforvirginia.com. joshforvirginia.com. We will give you a final word anywhere you'd like to go, with quite a few people watching you here on the show, Josh.
You know, the thing that I would like to say is simply, while there are a lot of things that are challenging in this world, there is a ton to be hopeful about. And one of the things that I get so excited about as I cross this district each and every day is the stories of people that are doing amazing things despite some of the odds that they're up against, the incredible work that folks are willing to do to try to not just preserve our democracy, but to really extend its life and its hope and its future far out. And so I see the great stuff. I know the negative stuff is there. To be honest, some of the negative stuff is what inspired my candidacy, for fear of what the trajectories are, and yet spending the last year and a half crisscrossing this district over and over has made me incredibly hopeful. There is so much that we can do. In the words of The Greatest Showman, one of my favorite movie musicals, we can live in a world we design. We are the ones who can actually make it happen, and we have to just go out and do the work and have the vision for it. We can absolutely do that, but we do need the right kinds of leaders to be in places like our local city council, our state legislature, and our federal government in order to make that happen with the support of the people around them. So I hope people will vote for me, and I hope we can go out and build something beautiful for the future.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks.
I thoroughly enjoyed this hour. Josh for Virginia, guys, is the website. Josh for Virginia is the website. And for those that are saying some not so pleasant things to me right now in the feed, I see them. I'm happy to host the incumbent on the program, and also happy to do a debate, so we see both sides of the coin. I will close with this. Anyone that's running for public office and wants to get civically engaged, no matter the ideology and whether you agree or believe or stand with them, either side, you got to commend people for wanting to get involved, because it's not for the money that folks do this for. The money never even comes close to the time and the sweat equity put into it. So please understand that. Please be respectful of the candidates, even if you don't agree with what they got to say. My name is Jerry Miller. I thought Josh Throneburg did an excellent job today. And we are now T-minus, 4 weeks?
4 weeks from tomorrow.
4 weeks from tomorrow to an election that has quite a bit of significance behind it. Thank you kindly for joining us, guys, on the I Love CVille show today. Have a good afternoon and take care.